On the program, we're talking about some of the factors that are playing a role in this demographic shift, if you will, that's causing people to retire at later ages. Obviously, with life expectancy going up, you would typically expect that to happen. But interestingly, prior to the past 30 years, there was actually a shift the other way, where people were retiring at earlier and earlier ages. Now that has reversed, where people are retiring at later ages. And some of that has to do with some of the structural changes that have happened. We were talking about two of the biggest ones in the prior segment. Number one, Social Security changing from full retirement age of 65 all the way up to 67, right? So that 2 years, that's definitely a significant change that affects and impacts how people think about retirement. Similarly, the transition away from pension plans, where there was almost an incentive to retire as early as possible, because that meant that you were going to get that guaranteed check as soon as possible, versus shifting over to 401ks, things like that. In the 1940s, the majority of Americans actually worked for an employer that provided a defined benefit plan. Today, that number is less than 5%. So pretty significant shift. Now more responsibility to fund things like 401ks, 403bs, 457s. Similarly, there's some other factors that are driving that trend. Next up on the list you'd have to say would be health insurance, because that becomes a big factor of trying to retire, particularly before the age of 65. 65 is when you are age eligible for Medicare. And while that certainly isn't free and isn't cheap if you're doing a supplement and Part B, the reality is, though, it is a considerable savings over trying to buy health insurance privately in those years leading up to age 65. So Medicare starting at age 65 becomes pretty important, because you certainly don't want a gap in coverage. And so it's important to kind of know that there is that age for Medicare at 65, and know that potential cost of what your health insurance could be should you want to try and retire at an earlier age. One of the best vehicles to sort of prepare potentially for that is a health savings account. And a health savings account is an account where you can use that for those medical expenses. And it's not something where if you don't use it all up in a year, it disappears. The balance in a health savings account does, in fact, carry forward going forward, and so then you can use it in later years. The reality is, though, that in order to have a health savings account, you have to have a high deductible insurance plan that is a specific type of health insurance plan that you have to have as that part in order to have that health savings account. So anyway, welcome into the program. This is Dollars and Cents with your host, Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning, talking a little bit about some of the factors that are impacting or extending out retirement ages for folks. And obviously, being healthier folks living longer. It's a simple, if you're living longer and your life expectancy for a male age 65 today has increased by almost 4 years since 1985. That's a significant increase in life expectancy. And there's a lot of studies that conclude that better health is strongly related to later retirement and vice versa. If you're working longer, you keep yourself mentally active, physically active, things like that, so that you can be healthy and be working. Certainly today, our jobs have a tendency to be less physically strenuous, more service and professional jobs in this economy than certainly there was 40 odd years ago. as those service and professional jobs certainly outpace the number of jobs that are in manufacturing. So most of the jobs and most of the work a little bit less physically strenuous. So obviously you want to stay healthy, and to a large extent working helps you stay healthy. So it's kind of like one of those things where one leads to the other, and they're constantly correlated, if you will. And then lastly is marriage. The reality is that women play a role in sort of delaying retirement because most couples prefer to retire at the same age. And wives, on average, statistically, are about 3 years younger than husbands. So then that means that the husband's got to work a little bit longer than their normal age, if you will, because if the wife is 3 years younger and they want to retire at the same time, then that's going to put the male roughly 3 years ahead or further past their normal age. So those are some of the factors that apply, and certainly as an increasing number of women working, and so you see that becoming a factor in why folks in general are retiring at later ages. So we thought it would be an interesting conversation for the program, sort of talking about those main factors and sort of some of the things that you can do to address them as well. Also, got another blog post up on the website, the most common regrets about retirement. We'll hit the highlights here in the last few minutes of this segment. We encourage folks to go to the website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com, and check out all of the full blog post that gets into a lot more details about some of the things that we'll hit here in the highlights. So one of the things that we talked about in the blog post is some of the biggest regrets that people have about retirement. The notion of wishing that you had planned earlier. We think there's 3 solutions to that. It starts with paying yourself first rather than last. Far too often people save money after they've spent all of their money for the month. If you pay yourself first, meaning that you are investing right out of the gate before you pay anything else, then that way you will ensure that you develop a good habit, number one, and then number two, make sure that you actually are investing some of your money or saving some of your money. Being consistent, being diversified, maintaining a budget, all of those kinds of things help folks to prepare better for retirement. Similarly, wishing that they had a plan for their income in retirement. I think far too often the financial services industry talks a lot about accumulate, save, but then they don't talk a whole lot about, okay, once I get there, what's the right strategy in terms of generating out income in retirement? And then lastly, a plan for your spare time, right? Those are the kinds of things that goes back to that the emotional and mental well-being that comes with having a purpose and a reason to get up in the morning. And certainly that's important to have that in retirement. Also in the blog post, talk a little bit about interest rates versus inflation, some of the investing fundamentals, and then we talk a little bit about our view on college loan forgiveness. If you caught the show a month or so ago, we've got a pretty strong opinion on that. Next week on the program, Rob and Christina will be hosting. The year starts to wind down, so Rob's going to be talking about some of the Social Security changes for next year, and then Christina will be talking about some of the tax changes for next year as well. So that's about all for this week's episode of Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. If you like what you heard, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice, or go to our website, Nelson Financial Planning, to schedule a free conversation for a review of your financial situation. Or you can just call the office, 407-629-6477. Have a great rest of your day.